Right, let's go. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's live stream. Just do a little bit of housekeeping, make sure everything's working. As usual, if someone could just confirm that the volume is okay, if you could confirm that in the chat, that'd be great. You won't be able to hear me if you haven't got your YouTube volume turned up, but make sure that volume button down there is set to the max. And I think that's it, isn't it? So today, as usual, we'll run for an hour. The format, if you haven't been on these before, we take a look at events for next week to look at, review the week quickly. Then most of today, as usual, we'll spend on the trading platform. Once I've been through the regular markets we look at, if you want to fire in any of the markets you want looking at, we'll take a look at those as well. And that's it. Please don't spam the chat with the market. I will get to it eventually. I do have to finish up on the dot of 3:30 today, so we do have an hour. So let's get going. So it's our weekly recap and market outlook for next week. Risk warning, first of all, this presentation is only for educational purposes. It does not contain and should not be construed as containing investment advice or an investment recommendation or an offer of or solicitation for a transaction in any financial instrument. David Jones and Capital.com accept no responsibility for any use that may be made of these comments and for any consequences that result. Spread bets and CFDs are complex instruments and come with a high risk of losing money rapidly due to leverage. 71.2% of retail investor accounts lose money when spread betting and or trading CFDs with this provider. You should consider whether you understand how spread bets and CFDs work and whether you can afford to take the high risk of losing your money. Okay, important events for next week. Monday, 17th of May, China retail sales. That'll be interesting, I think. Interesting insight into the Chinese economy. 18th of May, Tuesday, EU GDP. Latest update for the Eurozone's economic figures. So that will be an interesting one as well. Wednesday's a big day next week. I think we've got UK inflation. Clearly, inflation is a hot topic at the moment and has spooked markets a bit this week. So that's on Wednesday. And also Wednesday evening, UK time, we have the Fed minutes. So the US Central Bank releases the minutes from the last meeting. It's always interesting, can give some insight into how the central bankers in the US are thinking the US economy is shaping up, and also on that inflation question as well. So Wednesday, I think, could be a big one next week. Quick look at the markets before we look at the charts. New highs for the Dow Jones this week, Dow Jones Index, and increased volatility on inflation concerns. These have been rumbling in the background for a few months. I think I talked about it last week or the week before. You look at commodity prices and agricultural commodities. You look at copper, soybeans, cotton, coffee, platinum, palladium. These prices have been gaining, in recent months, and that's got to feed through to inflation further down the line. Things costing more, and markets got quite spooked about it this week. So let's see what happens. Gold and silver, a bit sideways. I think still we did a silver video yesterday. The trend in silver and gold, the short-term trends at least, are still up, but a bit of a boring week. We'll take a look at those when we look at the markets. Bitcoin and Ethereum, new highs in Ethereum this week. And then we saw crypto hit by Elon Musk's tweet about Tesla not taking Bitcoin now. Tesla, I think in the last couple of months, said they'd accept Bitcoin. Elon Musk tweeted yesterday, I think it was, that they'll stop taking it because of climate change concerns, because the amount of energy needed to mine Bitcoin. So Bitcoin took a bit of a hit off the back of that. It's bounced back a bit today, but we'll have a look at some of the cryptos as well, of course, during today. Crude oil, bit sideways, but I think still positive overall. We'll take a look at that one. FX, a little bit sideways. Big moves last week on those payrolls on FX, this time last week. Pound and the euro gained, but a bit of a sideways week. But again, as usual, we'll take a look at those as well. That's it. We'll do the live market analysis. Before I get into that, of course, any questions after this, to find out more about Capital.com, I'm doing this with Capital.com. Go to Capital.com. That's the platform I use, and that's the trading app you can download. For more about me and trading during the week and trading tips, davidjonestrading.com. That will take you to my Facebook page. So I do try and put up some thoughts on markets during the week. People have been asking about this trading course I've been writing. I think that should be available in about a week's time. Go there to find out more about that. Any questions after this? General trading questions? Drop me an email, david.jones@capital.com. Obviously, can't give financial advice, but any more general trading questions, more than happy to answer those via email. You can follow me on Twitter @JonesTheMarkets, and of course follow Capital.com on YouTube, Twitter and Facebook. You're watching now on YouTube. If you haven't subscribed to our channel, if you could click on subscribe. We push out 3 videos a week on various markets, so if you're subscribed, you'll get notified when they go in. Okay, let's have a look. Let's start off with stock markets. I think it's interesting, stock markets at the moment. Some volatility this week. This is the S&P 500, so the broader US stock market. But I thought why I'd start with this one and why I thought it was interesting. We've come back to this trend line just, in the last 24 hours or so. The trend from March of last year, the March lows, done a pretty good job on the way up. This is where we are. For fans of overbought, oversold, we are oversold on the RSI. So I think we're in bounce or bust territory, really, for stock market. So I think it'll be an interesting day next week, an interesting week going into next week. I mean, for me personally, even if it broke the trend line, I'd still be looking for a recovery back up. So although I put trend lines on the charts, they're not the be all and end all. But I thought it was interesting, some of the moves that we've seen. Let's take a look at some of the hourly charts, some of the shorter term stuff. So we did see the S&P push out, I think it was in out of hours trading, or maybe it did it during real trading as well. I think it did, to fresh all-time highs. And then it's these inflation concerns have really spooked markets. So we saw the market slammed, what was it, about 5%, which is not that massive a move, but given the lack of volatility recently, it's a pretty big move. So it's interesting. I think personally, I'd be looking for stock markets to bounce back. I think it's only, we've only been knocked back to where we were at the beginning of April, so not back about a month. So for me, still loads of support for stock markets. The S&P running from, the late Jan lows, but 38.50 is a big level, I think, from March. So again, less than a couple of months ago. So it's made it an interesting week, but I don't think it's changed too much in terms of the trend, to be honest. Stock markets, so look at the Nasdaq. Let's flip this over to a daily chart on the Nasdaq. So the Nasdaq has lost that trend a bit, but as I say, that's not the be-all and end-all for me. We're still above pretty major support. I'd pick up on the March lows at 12,200 on the Nasdaq. Also, late March lows, 12.6. So, again, quite an exciting couple of weeks for the Nasdaq, dropping from 14,000 to 13,000. So losing, about 7% or so. But it'd be interesting to see if it can build on some sort of recovery this afternoon. Well, it is already in the overnight market. See where it ends the day and going into next week. But I'll be watching to see if we sort of bit of strength come back for stock markets. Same thing if we bring it over to the Ftse, bring it to the UK. Take a look at that. I've got a few trades on the Ftse. I came out of one of them this week. But I've been following this trend, depending on where you take the trend from. Maybe for me, the more relevant trend is the move since February in the Ftse. Let's take a look at that. Looking something like that. So again, I had a little look below the trend line yesterday. Strong move today, back up above 7,000 today. So again, I think it's interesting for me, this trend in the Ftse. The Ftse is always a bit of an odd market. I did post a bit about it on my Facebook page this week, but a bit of an odd one. But I'd be looking for a run back up to those 7150 highs, but clearly so much depends on what goes on in US markets. And the DAX, the German stock market, DAX, here we go. It's been a bit flat, the DAX, for about a month now. It spiked down yesterday. I thought what's interesting, held above the lows from earlier in May anyway. So we're still in this trend for the DAX. So for me, still bullish. I'd be worried a bit if it started breaking below these March lows around 14,400. But for me, when we have a trend that's up, I'd still want to be a buyer of dips obviously, I think, because I'm a trend follower. So that's that. And the Nikkei, I've still got a trade running on the Nikkei. It's been a bit disappointing, the Nikkei. Needs to really get a move on. But probably one of the worst performers in recent months. Japanese stock market index got knocked back to 27,000 yesterday. I think this 27,000 area is interesting because it was the old highs before the breakout in December. I think I bought I've got a position open from December the 1st in the Nikkei. So it's been up a bit. It's come down a bit. I think my stop is about 27,000 on that at the moment. We'll see. We'll see how that works out. But really, I think if it starts next week losing 27,000, I think the risk is for more weakness in the Nikkei. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But for US stock markets as ever are the ones to watch, and the one I'd be watching is the S&P, and we are still in that trend. We're still in that trend from the March lows last year, of course, isn't it? So we're about 14 months into that. It's not going to go on forever, but for me at the moment, it hasn't ended just yet. So let's see. Let's see what happens. What should we do next? Crude oil. So US crude. So again, I've got a trade open on crude as well. Just declare my position there. I think we've got a few trades running in this account on crude as well. Yeah. Did we do a video this week? Or was it a week ago? I can't remember. What's the date today? 14th. Must have been last week. They were filled last week. I think I had orders in to buy crude. So up slightly on that. I still think it's positive, crude oil. I think if we flip it over to an hourly, perhaps we'll have a bit more insight. That's the trend that's chugging. That's a great little trend in crude from the 5th of April. So we're, 5 weeks into this. And there we go. Got knocked back yesterday to 63, back to the trend line. So for me, I'm happy to stay long crude. I think if we moved below 63, 62, 75 next week, I might change my opinion. But for me, I'd be looking for a run back up to 66 plus from here in crude. Let's flip it over to the dailies. If we can find a bit of momentum, then I'd be targeting a run back up to the March highs, just ahead of $68. So, I think it's lost a lot of volatility compared to how it was moving in sort of Feb into March. We saw a swing from $52 to 68. What's that? A 30% rise in the price of oil. We don't have that sort of volatility at the moment, but a nice little trend chugging along in crude. And for me, that's still very much intact. I saw someone mention Brent Crude. Let's take a look at that. That was West Texas we were looking at. I'm guessing that the trend in Brent is going to be pretty much the same. I mean, they're different prices because they're different qualities of oil. But, the overall moves are pretty much the same. So there's our trends, or something like that, I suppose, in Brent. So 66 would be a level to watch next week. We've seen it hold yesterday. So, again, a bit of volatility on these inflation concerns and everything else, but still positive for me, for these markets. So we have a look at the crazy world of cryptos. So Bitcoin got knocked on the tweet from Mr. Musk. There we go. So he tweeted, was it last night? It must have been last night he tweeted, because that was the move, wasn't it? Oh, wait, maybe it was the night before last. It was Wednesday night. So he's put out this tweet about Tesla not accepting Bitcoin anymore. And the market goes from 54,000 to 46. So what's that? 15% move. The strength of Elon Musk. But I think it's interesting because we are seeing today a recovery. So for me, I don't trade cryptos that much. I did have a position on Ethereum. I did close it out this week, actually. But for me, I could be tempted to be a buyer if I really wanted to buy Bitcoin. We've got this trend, obviously, off the October levels. We've got previous support from late April at 47,000. Bigger support back here at 43. If I was a buyer now at 50 and a half, I'd put my stop the other side of 43,000. I mean, clearly nothing today is financial advice, just for educational purposes. But for me, that trend is still up. Lots of support for Bitcoin. It's been a while since it made all-time highs, relatively speaking. It's been a month. But for me, nothing has really changed that trend. I think a lot of people, though, will have got clobbered in this move from what I was reading on Twitter. And I think perhaps that's one of the reasons I'm a little bit anti-crypto. I think it sucks in lots of people who've never traded before. And it's great when the market does this and just goes up every day. But I think with some of the volatility we've seen, particularly for Bitcoin over the last month, 6 weeks or so, I think a lot of people are getting perhaps a little bit badly burnt on those sort of moves. So Ethereum was making, or did make, all-time highs this week. So I was in it and I trailed my stop up and I got taken out the other day. But again, it's a strong recovery today. So it'd be interesting to see what it does next week. I think it's always difficult. I think a lot of people who trade crypto don't worry too much about risk management. They just assume it's going to carry on going to the moon. I think the difficulty for me with trading these markets is how wide the stops have to be and where the volatility is. You know, for me, I probably want my stop below 2,000 if I was trading Ethereum at the moment, but that's 50% away from where it is now. So I think it's a difficult market to practice sensible risk management on. Perhaps, I mean, even a closer place for a stop would be below these 7th of May lows, which is, let's not forget, it's only a week ago. So 3,300, which is still $700 away from where we are now, 15% plus from where we are now. So, but for me, Ethereum still looks the strongest. The trend is still up. It wouldn't surprise me if we saw fresh all-time highs in Ethereum being set again. So let's see what happens. Let's look at the more traditional markets. Should we look at gold and silver? What should we do first? Let's do silver. I did a trade on silver yesterday. We do have a few trades running, actually. Here we go. Natural gas is still doing well. We might have a look at that a bit later. So that was the video yesterday. So bought 240 silver at 26.93.8. The market's 27.38, so it's slightly in our favour. I still stand by what I've said for a few months now. I think it's a boring market, silver. I do have a trade on for myself as well in my own account. But if you look at silver over the last, 9 months now, it's just sideways. It's a sideways market. It's pretty scrappy, I think. I don't think we're going to see $30 anytime soon, famous last words. But we do have this little trend going on, and this was the reason. If you want to find out more about the rationale behind the trade, watch yesterday's video on the channel. But I was looking at the little trend, which is a great trend actually in silver. Off the late March lows, this is where we are. So the video I did yesterday was about 1:30 UK time. So about here is where I bought with a stop. Can't remember where the stop was. Down here, 25.50. That was the stop. So for me, next week, assuming this trend is going to continue in silver, looking for a run back up to 27.80, this $28 area again. You know, I think it's still short-term bullish. Silver 28 has been a real problem. You can see back here the highs from the end of Feb at 28.30. So let's see. Maybe if it breaks 28.30, it gets a bit more exciting and we get a bit more hashtag $30 silver traders coming in. Let's see what happens with silver. But for now, that trend is still chugging away. So gold, have we got any trades on gold? I think we probably have somewhere. Let's have a quick look. Yeah, gold. So bought gold the 29th of April, video, whatever that was, can't remember. Bought it, 17.75 bought gold with a stop at 17.10. We're probably need to think about moving that now. So the market's 18.40 at the moment, so we're up a couple of £100 and a bit on that. Gold is interesting because we do have, I think that was the other video we did this week, was gold. We do have lots of conflicting trends on gold at the moment. If we take this right out, going back to August 2018, the lows for gold, that trend is very much intact. So the longer term trend, 2.5 year plus, still very much up for gold. We do have this correction that's been in place since August, the August highs last year, up at 2,075 an ounce. And that correction's still going. And I think it's really crunch time coming up for gold. So it is really interesting because we've got this old correction coming in pretty much, 1860, so $20 higher than where we are now. Will we finally get a breakout from this correction? That's the thing to watch next week. So we've got the trade running anyway. I put another order in to buy if it gets to 1880. So if we see some real strength next week, perhaps finally we see a change in sentiment for gold. But again, like silver, the trend for gold since March has been up. Let's take a look at that in a bit more detail. Here we go. So that's our little trend chugging away. So for me, really interesting week next week. It's nearly back up to those highs again, 1845. We've got those Fed minutes next week on Wednesday night. That could be interesting and cause a bit of volatility. But the short to medium term trend for gold is still up. And I think it's one to watch next week, gold. See if it can break through this old correction. So I'm sure we probably won't do another pre-recorded video on gold next week unless it goes crazy. But we'll probably do one the week after and see how we're getting on with that. Okay, gold and silver. Let's do the currencies. So euro. It has been a bit of a sideways week after the surge we saw last week. So this was last Friday on the payrolls. Those payrolls came in much worse than expected. So it's sold off a bit this week, but quite a bit of strength today. Now for me, I do still think we could see the euro and the pound gain against the US dollar from here. I think it's a bit of a tricky one to call at the moment, but the longer term trend, or the 12-month trend for the euro is still up. We came back near that longer term trend late March. And I think back then I was saying it rallied and I was waiting for a bit of a dip to buy it, and it never happened. So I missed it. So I missed the move. But I think it will be interesting next week. I think clearly 122 has been a problem. So maybe we have a bit more back and forth for euro against the dollar next week. For fans of the RSI, we have this thing called bearish divergence going on. The market's pushed to a high and has pushed a little bit higher again, but the RSI has made a lower high. So this can be a suggestion that perhaps it's starting to struggle a bit up here. Let's see. Let's see what happens next week. But perhaps we end up with a bit of a choppy week for euro against the dollar. Let's take a look at pound against the dollar. Here we go. So it's interesting, this, because I think that the big trend is still up, I think, for the pound against the dollar from March to wherever we are now. Had quite a period of losing ground. Then we've made this base. March lows 136.70, April lows 136.68, and it's recovering. So for me, I think as the year goes on, we could well see the pound move a bit higher. But I don't know what I would do now, and I think in trading, if you don't know what you would do now, then the best thing to do is to do nothing. So I do have, again in my old account, an old trade running on sterling against the dollar. For me, if we had a bit of weakness next week, down to 139, it looks interesting, picking up on this little trend from April. So for me, I'd rather have a deeper pullback next week to look for a trading opportunity. So let's see what happens. But one trade I do have running, which I think is interesting, I think it's only slightly in profit at the moment, but euro sterling. So if we take the dollar out of the equation, I think euro sterling's interesting because we'd had this slide in the euro against the pound from December, where a euro would buy you 92 pence, down to 85 in April, breaks out this downtrend, shows a bit of strength, and it has sort of rallied over the last couple of days. So I think if for me, and again, this is not financial advice, but for me it's interesting if we thought the euro was going to be stronger than the pound in the weeks ahead from where we are now. The market's at 86.10 at the moment. We've got a low from April down at 84.70. So for me, it'd be a wide stop trade, a couple of 100 points stop is the trade I've got on at the moment. But looking to see, do we get a push back and claim back some of this ground? So I think that's an interesting market to watch, euro sterling. And the other market, of course, which I do mention every week, the dollar index. So much, on this inflation question. Do we see a dollar come back? We're not seeing it so far. It's lost a lot of ground since April. It's my biggest losing open position at the moment is the dollar index. I wrote about it again on that Facebook page this week. I'll go into a bit of detail about that. And I think it's bounce or bust time for the dollar index from here. We're back to these lows from January this year, down around 89.20. So the market's about 100 points above it at the moment. So it'll be a really interesting market to watch next week. Clearly, it's getting slammed today, which is helping the likes of gold and silver, for example. But it'll be an interesting one to watch. Do we see strength come back in for the US dollar? let's see what happens next week. So lots to watch. I'm going to jump into the questions in a sec and look at some of those questions that have come in. But what to watch next week? Stock markets, I think, because we've had a tough week this week for the bulls. Oh, look at that, strong open today. So this is the S&P. Do we see a strong finish today? And does it all gear up for fresh all-time highs again next week? So I think that's an interesting one to watch. And gold and silver for once, because we have these little trends chugging along in these markets. So do we see finally, particularly with gold, a breakout from this correction that's been in place for a while? So let's see what happens. Right, let's do the questions. Let me jump in and have a look at the questions and see what we've got. Hang on a second, let me scroll down. Any tips on how to move stop losses? Yes, I do cover it in my course, little advert, but what I'd say is people move stop losses too early. So for me, I want to see the market move a decent amount before I move the stop loss. So if I was a buyer now of gold at 1840, for example, and I put a stop loss at 1800, so that's a 40-point stop loss, $40 stop loss. I want to see the market move a decent amount. I'd be crazy to take profits just when it moves 20 points in my favour, because I had a 40-point stop loss to begin with. So the whole area of stop losses isn't really given enough thought, I think, by new and also existing traders. So I think the thing to do with stop losses, don't be in a hurry to move them. Have a bit of patience. Let the trade play out. Don't sit there and snatch at profits. So be patient when it comes to stop losses. The downside is that in a market that's really moving in your favour, you end up giving back profits when the market turns. But unfortunately, there's no perfect way to get out of the top when it comes to trading. So for me, I am patient with stop losses, and we'll set them wide and we'll give the market time to move in my favour. I should really, for example, on these natural gas trades we've got running, I should bump all these stop losses up now to break even, because the market has moved quite a bit in our favour. So I should move some of those stop losses. But on stuff like Twitter, the trade we did last week, we bought at 54.73 last week. The market's 50.69. My stop was at 48. I'm not doing anything with that, obviously, because it's still losing money. On the small silver trade from this week, from yesterday's video, I bought at 26.94. The market is 50 points in our favour. I'm up 85 quid. No reason to move the stop loss, because my risk on that trade was 250 quid. The market's got to move a lot more in my favour for me to start moving that stop. Okay, Bitcoin. Can Bitcoin go beyond 60? And we did have a quick look at Bitcoin, didn't we? I don't think it's ridiculous, is it? It's only pushing back up to where it was on the 8th of May. We need to have a bit of a sense of perspective there. It was nearly at 60 on last Saturday. So I think, assuming this trend is continue, be expecting to see Bitcoin push back up again. Let's see what happens. Let's see, what else have we got? Bitcoin, gold, you did gold, hang on a second. What's your price prediction for Ethereum for the end of the year? Completely meaningless is what I would say for that. I think trying to come up with price predictions for cryptos, actually even for any market that far out, I would take price predictions for any market that long term with a pinch of salt. But fair point. Aussie dollar, interesting market. I do have a couple of trades on the Aussie dollar and also the New Zealand dollar. I did actually do something on Facebook about this, because I'm not a fan of patterns, chart patterns. But if you went back to sort of early April for Aussie dollar, some people would say, there's a head and shoulders, head, shoulder, blah, blah, blah. I'm not really a fan of that sort of stuff. But I did wonder, could we see a rally from here? And we have seen it so far. So I'm still sort of mildly bullish. I'm still long, which does suggest that I am still bullish on the Aussie dollar. And the trend I'd pick up on, it has lost clearly quite a chunk of momentum. It's a great time to be trading it from November into end of Feb. It has lost a lot of momentum since then, but I think it's quite interesting from here. If we pick up on, what's the trend I'm going to look at? Let's just take that off these lows, the April the 1st lows. from here. Looking at, so it has sort of, it's almost like it's trying to drop out of the trend line. But like I said, just because it breaks the trend line, I don't worry about that. I worry more about the support side. Big support at 76.75. If I was a buyer now, perhaps that's the trade we'll do. Let's do a trade on the Aussie dollar. So the low was 76.75 back here. Came down to 76.80 something yesterday and it's bounced back. So for me, that trend, the little trend since April, is still up for the Aussie dollar. So let's buy it with a stop at 76.50. So for me, immediate target would be a run back up, 10th of May highs ahead of 79, maybe even higher. But I think it's an interesting trade. I would actually have bought it if we had done this yesterday at 77.25. But let's put the trade on with a stop at 76.50. Okay, so stop goes in first. We only risk 100 quid on these trades. So how much is that? So if I buy 11,000, let's keep buying. I buy 12,000 Aussie dollar now, 77.67-ish, with a stop at 76.50. You can see on the chart. I think that's an interesting trade, and my risk is about 98 quid. Let's do that. So I'm really buying into that little trend to see if the break yesterday was a false one. Can we get a move up over the next week or so, back up to there? Let's see how that one turns out. What else have we got? Aussie dollar, we did that. Gold and silver, we've done that. What's your opinion on Ripple? Do you know, I haven't even looked at that in months, but let's have a look. Ripple. Look on the daily chart. It looks, I don't know. This is the problem I have with these cryptos. We just have these crazy moves, don't we? So what do? We're still well off the all-time highs for Ripple, back at 328. But you know, it goes from 190 down to, well, it halved, didn't it? So it halved during April. What would you do if I was a buyer now? If I had to buy it now, the closest I want my stop would be the other side of 120. But it seems like a lot of noise in this one, and you know, I'm not really a Bitcoin trader. Otherwise, I'd be 30 years younger, wouldn't I? And doing this session, smoking a joint. So it's not really a market for me. But perhaps just more volatility for this one. Copper, good one. I think I bought some more copper the other week on the breakout. I saw someone say, we did a video on copper, and someone said, oh, that's definitely a top. And I just think, I don't even know how you could say that at the moment. You know, I think this is one of the problems, that we all have issues trading trends. For me, the trend on copper is definitely up. I think there is a trade in here running on copper somewhere from the video. Oh, here we go. We're up. So I bought 26th of April video, bought the breakout, that was it, bought at 4.4. So we're up 150 quid on the copper trade. So I bought back in here on the video. For me, the trend is still up. It's pulled back. You know, it's spent all this week pretty much losing ground from that 10-year plus high, I think that was on copper. Yeah, 10-year plus. So took out the 2011 highs. So for me, I would still be a buyer on dips in copper. The only question is, where would my stop go? I don't know. Probably the absolute closest I'd want it would be the other side of 440, if not further. So for me, personally, I'd be waiting for the strength to come back in and be a buyer in copper. So let's see. Do you do videos on other things than gold or silver? Yeah, we did videos this week on a few different things. We do oil quite regularly. That's always a popular one. I mean, it is. We are, to an extent, we're sort of driven by what's popular on the channel. But there's our channel. So we did silver, gold, oil, natural gas, Bitcoin, DAX, Ethereum, silver, copper, Coinbase, did something on ETFs. So if you subscribe to our channel, you can see all of this stuff anyway. So there you go. So that's that. Copper, we did copper, sugar and wheat. Wheat's interesting, but I mean, they've all been moving. These agricultural stuff, as we've been saying for a while now. I do still have an open trade on sugar. For me, the trend in sugar is up. It's got hit quite hard this week. But I would treat that as a buying opportunity. I think, 15, big level for sugar, 1st of April lows. So for me, that trend is still up, and I'd be looking to see if we get a bit of strength coming back in to be a buyer. Wheat, same thing. Wheat's a funny market, but the trend is still, it's been a bit sideways for quite a few months now. But I think the longer term trend is still up in wheat. It's clearly struggled with these highs from Jan, so it's perhaps a little bit boring at the moment. But for me, if I was a buyer now, the closest I'd have my stop, the other side of the April lows. So let's see. Thanks for the comment about the Facebook stuff. Glad you're enjoying that. Let's see what else. 28 silver. Carbon traders. Okay, so this is from James, who was the one who mentioned the carbon emissions market. What's that done? Oh, it's still going up. I can't believe it. Look at this every week and it's still going up. Crazy. I think when did we first look at it? It was a couple of weeks ago, wasn't it? So it would have been the end of April when it was about 48, and it's at 55 now. There we go. So carbon traders, keep an eye on what happens next week when the UK leaves the EU's carbon scheme on the 19th. Worth some reading up on, and then a good watch before making the moves. Okay, well, we'll come back to that one next week and see. But carbon emissions, I'd never use the phrase free money, but I suppose if you were in that trend, it may well have felt like it for much of May, because it's going up. Let's see what happens though. Let's come back to it. No market goes up forever, of course. But let's see what happens. Amazon. Yeah, let's have a look at Amazon. So Amazon stock. They've been a bit boring from memory, and they're still a bit boring. So Amazon hit a peak in September last year, really sideways since then. Had a very brief look out late April on their earnings, and just so fresh all-time highs on their earnings, and just pulled back into the range. For me, if I had to do anything on Amazon, I'd probably be a buyer now. A logical place to have a stop would be the other side of $2,870 a share. So I wonder, are they going to gear up for another push? Let's see. But pretty boring, isn't it, since September last year? Amazon. Dollar, Turkish lira. Let's have a look at that. Dollar, Turkish lira. I do remember, we looked at those within the last few months, didn't we? Because we saw there's this massive volatility. I remember that they sacked the head of the central bank, was it? Or was it the finance minister? Something in March. It's interesting up here. I suppose if you really thought the US dollar was going to run out of steam against the Turkish lira, then we're here. We had these highs in November, up at 8.57, came up near there yesterday. So I suppose I never look at this market. The bigger trend is up, going back, 3 years now? More than 3 years. The bigger trend is up, but perhaps we'll see a bit of nervousness for the US dollar up here. Let's come back and look at it in a couple of weeks and see what happens up here, up at these levels. Any opinion on Warren Buffett warning about inflation? I think we should always listen to what Warren Buffett says. Definitely pay attention to what he's saying about inflation. What's your opinion on inflation? That was published this week. I was trying to figure out a way of trading inflation. I mean, commodity prices is one way, isn't it? I mean, commodities have moved a long way anyway. But traditionally, commodities would do well in a more inflationary environment. So let's see. I do. It does feel like inflation is going to be more of a problem than it was being given credit for. And if we see, interest rates maybe have to go up sooner rather than later. But let's see. Let's have a look at natural gas. Yes, natural gas is breaking out again today. I saw someone said that the video I did on natural gas, I was biased because I bought it, which I thought, okay, fair enough. But I think it's broken out to a new recovery high today. I did notice. There we go. Funny market, natural gas. It's one of my biggest winning open positions at the moment in this account and my own personal account as well. There's the move today. A really brief look up to 305 today, natural gas. Clearly, it's been pretty sideways for a while. Clearly, 3, whenever it pokes its nose up above 3, it really struggles. So I think this could be another interesting market next week, natural gas. I suppose, we've got a lot of divergence going on the RSI. I suppose you could take the view, if you wanted to go short, great levels to go short on natural gas, with a stop maybe above 310. I would take the view, clearly the trend is still up on natural gas. That's these weird moves though, these sudden sharp moves, and then just goes nowhere for ages. But I've been in the trade for my own account since March. The trend looks something like that. So for me, it'd be interesting to see how it ends up today. We've seen the last 3 hours the market's been selling off. Do we see some buyers come back in? Let's see what happens. But it's been a good trade in the account. So we're up 600 quid on the natural gas trade. This has been our biggest winner. But I do need to think about moving those stop losses in case we see a reversal. But overall, it's all positive, I think. What do you think about Tesla today? Tesla's interesting. Tesla, we've launched a stock channel. I'll talk about it more next week. But we've launched a channel for stocks on YouTube. And I did the video just this morning on Tesla. It is bang on its trend line off the March lows. And it's oversold on the RSI. So it's really interesting. Down here, it's fallen 35% from the all-time highs in Jan, and we're back to the trend line. And I do think this whole 500 to 540 or 570 area is a really interesting one for Tesla, and perhaps this is where we see the buyers come back in. I have to say, it's not the case just yet for Tesla. It's still weak. But I think this is a really interesting stock to watch next week, Tesla. So let's come back to it. What do you think about Steam, Bitcoin? I've got absolutely no idea what that is. So I can't really give an opinion on that. What do you think of the Russell 2000? Good one. We never look at that, do we? I must admit, I never look at this myself either. So it's the US smaller cap, isn't it? Or mid cap, small cap index. Let's have a look at that, rather than looking at the big stuff. It's interesting, it's really stalled, hasn't it, since March, when we have the big stuff, the Dow and the S&P making fresh all-time highs. For me, if I had to trade it, I'd be a buyer now. I think it's quite interesting. It's pushed down yesterday to 2100. Lots of support from late Jan, from 2000 through to 2100. So for me, personally, I'd still be looking for perhaps a run back up to the old highs on the Russell. Really interesting market. We should maybe do more on that. There we go. There's our, I could draw the trend line properly. There's our trend off the March lows. So interesting one. I'll be expecting or seeing if that can squeeze a bit higher. Let's see what happens. We did crude oil, Johnson & Johnson. Let's take a look at Johnson & Johnson. So US stock, Johnson & Johnson. Breakout, you reckon? I would say not quite yet. On a weeklies maybe, but I'm guessing that the bigger trend is up anyway. Let's have a look at that. Nice little trend chugging away. So I suppose, for me, what I would do personally, I'd wait for a break through the January highs at 173 a share. It's only $3 away from where it is now. Or I'd wait to see, do we get weakness back to the trend line? So for me, it's almost a bit no man's land at the moment, but we can't argue with that trend. That trend is still up. So it'll be an interesting one to see if it breaks above those old highs. Yeah, we did copper and the S&P, so you can watch the recording of that. The recording of this when it's finished. Dollar Turkey. Can you move the camera to bottom left? I can't see what market it is. That's a fair point, actually. Hold on. I don't know if I can actually do that. Let's see if that works. See if that actually translates to YouTube. Russell 2000, we looked at that. We looked at the dollar index, looked at the Russell, carbon to the moon, silver and gold, yeah. Alibaba, yes. We looked at those, didn't we, the other week? Their earnings were out this week, weren't they? Someone did say they were out this week, then someone corrected them on the chat and said, no, they were out already. But I think they did have earnings this week, Alibaba. It's interesting, I think, where they are, because they're right they've done a bit of a Tesla, where they are right on the trend line. So for me, they're still a bit weak. But it'll be an interesting one to come back to next week, because for me, as a good trend follower, I'd be thinking about being a buyer. They're $110 off the all-time high Big move, isn't it? 30% off that all-time high, which was in November last year. But interesting one down here. So I would definitely, if I traded lots of stocks, which I don't, that could be one for my watch list, down where it is now. Let's see what happens. Let's come back to it. Wheat, dollar index, coal. I don't think we cover coal, but I've been wrong before. Let's have a look. No, we do Yanzhou coal, which is doing well. China Coal Energy, that's had a heck of a move, isn't it? I mean, clearly coal is. I'm guessing coal is doing well because these coal stocks are doing well, but it's not. We don't cover that market directly. Nestle. Okay, let's have a look at those. I don't think we looked at those before. So Nestle, what do they get classified as, Nestle? Swiss food and beverages. Okay. It's a bit boring, isn't it? It's very boring, actually. If we go back to 2019, it's been going sideways for a year and a half, Nestle. So just for me, I would look at that and then go and look at something else because there's nothing in it for me, for my style of trading. I suppose if you thought this trend, this run-up since February was different to all the others, you could be a buyer, and I'd put my stop down at 105, 104 maybe. But we've seen lots of problems for Nestle over the last year and a half, up at Swiss francs, isn't it? Up at 112, 110, 112 has been a real problem area. So I'd be concerned it could be running into a bit of difficulty up at these levels, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. Basket of commodities, DBC. I don't think we cover them, but you never know. DBC, is that? This market is not available yet. It sounds like an interesting market, though, that one. What was the other one you said? DBA. I'm guessing that won't be available either. No. Interesting, though, those markets. Which company would gain best due to chip shortage? I don't know, because there is that global chip shortage. I saw there's something on the BBC website today. Think of a chip manufacturer. I suppose Intel? I don't know. No, I don't know. Maybe if anyone's got any ideas, put them in and we'll have a look at them. What about corn? Let's have a look at corn. Oh, not available yet, corn. Let me have a look. I think soybeans is the one we look at, isn't it, occasionally? Let's have a look at the beans. Again, that's not a market we cover yet, but hopefully we will start covering it. Let me just bring it up on another platform. Oh, big reversal yesterday in soybeans. There we go. But I've mentioned this quite a few times that I had a trend on this since January, and it's gone nowhere. Shows you the importance of patience, and finally got a move on during April. Big down day yesterday in soybeans, but for me, I'll still be thinking about maybe being a buyer. Let me see if it covers corn on this platform. Let's see if we can bring it up. Then we'll jump back onto ours. No, I don't have it on there either. Sorry about that. Can't look at that one. Leave, yes. What are your thoughts on Ftse? We did the Ftse. I think it's still in its uptrend, the Ftse. Is it too late to buy Bitcoin? Well, if you think Bitcoin is going to the moon, then the answer is no. If you think it's made a top already, then the answer is yes. I know that's not very helpful, but we did actually cover Bitcoin. Disney. Let's have a look at Disney. When did they have the big jump? I think it was when they announced they were going to launch the channel, their TV channel. Oh, back here, wasn't it? God, is it that long ago? How time flies. So the big jump back in 2019 when they were going to announce streaming. Then, of course, they got clobbered last year in the sell-off with everything. I think it could be quite interesting, Disney. Let's have a quick look at the trend in Disney. See what that looks like. So for me, the trend is still up. It's still pretty weak. I wonder if they had earnings or something yesterday because they got hit quite hard yesterday. But whatever, that trend is still up. So for me, I'd still be looking for buying opportunities. The trend is still up. We got good support from Jan down at 158 before it pushed out to its best level, perhaps all-time highs. So for me, I'd be looking to be a buyer, but perhaps not yet. Perhaps wait to see if a bit of strength comes in next week. Let's see. Space and Neo. What's space? Do you mean the Virgin Galactic? Is that space? So we look at Virgin Galactic anyway, because I know they got hammered this week, didn't they? Virgin Galactic. Ouch. Look at that. It's a great demonstration of, I think, the importance of having stop losses, I think. And I saw it was, again, I do read all the comments that go on our YouTube channel. I might not reply to all of them, but I do read them. And someone made a comment about not having a stop loss was the better way to trade. And I did think they're completely wrong, but there you go. But so Virgin Galactic has gone from $62 to $16 today. I think we looked at them back here when they were at 20. And I think I'd say the same thing again. If you absolutely wanted to buy them with a massive speculative punt, then you're getting pretty much a bargain price, aren't you? But I would, for me, clearly the trend is down and everything else. So for me, not so much. But if you really wanted to, I suppose the closest you could have a stop, or I'd have a stop, the low from this week down at $13.80. But for me, the trend is down, so not for me, not for me. OIH, what is OIH? If people could use the name rather than the code, is it crude oil? I don't even know. But we did do crude oil. We did Ethereum as well. We did have a look at Ethereum. Clack is a chip maker. Thanks for that. Let's have a look at those. KLAC. Designs and semiconductors. Okay, but I wonder. I don't know. I mean, I don't know that much about this chip shortage. I know there is one because I see the stories and I see things like car manufacturers saying they can't. I think Audi said it was going to affect their production because they can't get chips for the cars. I don't know how it affects the chip manufacturers because again, I suppose they can't sell as many as they hoped they would. But KLA is an interesting one. Trend is up. If I had to do a trade on that, I would be a buyer. Trend is up, just coming off, which I'm guessing is all-time highs at 360. Good support from March at 272. For me, it looks an interesting trade, that one, down here. So there we go. What do you think about Rolls-Royce? I think we did this the other week, actually. And I think for me, it's one of those, wouldn't touch it with the barge pole shares because, and this is Rolls-Royce, not the car manufacturer, because that is owned by BMW. This is Rolls-Royce, the engine manufacturer who make engines for planes and stuff. Completely different companies. For me, it's just boring. It absolutely fell off a cliff all the way down. It's just a boring market, bombed out share. Okay, maybe one day it gets back to £4, but maybe it goes down to 10p. Who knows? Again, I suppose if for me, it's not trading. It's if you fancied a punt. If I was a buyer now at 105, I'd put my stop loss the other side of 85, a wide stop. But it's that sort of market. So for me, not zero interest in trading stuff like that. But that's what I would do with those. Sydney Airport. Who even knew that trade? I don't know if we cover them. Sydney Airport stapled. There we go. Whatever that means. Have they only just come to the market? We don't have a lot of history, as you can see. We've only got data going back to the 22nd of April, but they look to be quite weak on the information we have. So I think we need to come back to that when we've got a bit more data. Brent Oil, we looked at Brent Oil. We had a look at Brent Oil. We did the Nasdaq 100 as well. So the Nasdaq 100 was a bit earlier on, but just as a reminder, I think it's fallen out of that trend. But for me, still loads of support running. I'd only start to worry about the Nasdaq if it fell below 12,000 for me. So for me, the trend is still up on that Nasdaq 100, although it has struggled clearly during May really. Apache. Let's have a look at Apache. So Apache, is it natural gas? Oh, okay, natural gas and petroleum, because they had that problem, didn't they, with the pipeline getting hacked over the last weekend. It's interesting. There's quite a few US stocks that look like this, and I think it's an interesting one, Apache, because you could say, if you're going to take the really big picture, we only have data going back to 2017. The trend is down. Okay, so they've got back in 2017, they were $60 a share, they're $21 today. So we've got, again, a bit conflicting trends. We do have, I think for me, there's probably not a trade there. We do have a bit of a recovery going on. For me, I'd probably rather sit it out and wait to see what happens. And I'd rather be a buyer on weakness than a buyer on strength, if that makes sense. So if you got knocked back down to 1750, it looks a bit more interesting to me. But for me, not one at the moment. Disney missed subscriber targets. Thanks for that. That was the hit in Disney yesterday. So we saw that relatively. Let's have a look on the shorter term chart. Oh yeah, that was. So they went from about 179 down to 169. So that was the move in Disney. Thanks for that update. Plug Power. Let's have a look at Plug Power. Plug Power Inc. Are they an electric car company or something? Oh, hydrogen fuel. Okay, for the electric mobility and stationary power markets. Now I always have a problem with ones like this. Oh, actually, no, let's go back to the daily chart. For me, quite a bit of volatility, a bit sort of crazy volatility, really. Even on the 11th of May, it went from 18.40 to 23.50. So what's that? A $5 move. It's a 25% move in a day. I always have a problem with crazy markets like that. For me, the trend is still down, so I'd be doing nothing, to be honest, at the moment on that one. And the volatility is a little bit crazy at the moment for me, but I'd be taking the view in Plug Power, that trend is still down. So I'd be watching as an interested bystander at the moment. So even though it's broken out for the trend line, if I had to do a trade, I'd be selling short, I think, to cut to the chase with a stop above 26 on Plug Power. That's what I'd be doing. So, yeah. Let's see. Arnigo broke through the 100 EMA. Arnigo. Amigo. I don't know why I couldn't read that properly. That's my eyes. Amigo broke through the 100-day moving average. Let's have a look. It's pretty volatile again, isn't it? What is it? Oh, it is the loan lending company. Okay. Wow. Because that has had a torrid time, hasn't it? There's been lots of boardroom disputes and everything else going on. So they were £2.85 a share in 2019, 22p now. I'm not a big fan of these little penny shares, but if we looked at it in isolation, it's broken out through all these old highs at 20p. But again, it's massively volatile, isn't it? It was 30p on the 10th of May, and then 18p on the 11th of May. That's crazy. That's 40% swings in 2 days. So I don't know. I suppose, again, if you fancied a punt, be a buyer at 22 with a stop, I don't know, down at 16 or something, which is a 30% stop. It's a big old stop, isn't it? So not one for me, but some interesting moves there. And I thought we'd look at it as you are, of course, the carbon emissions pointer outer. Okay. Amigo, we did that. NG is NG natural gas. We looked at natural gas. AAL seems overextend on the weekly. AAL, what's AALL? AALL. Anglo-American. Oh, is it Anglo-American? It was AAL Anglo-American. Is that the one? Nice trend, though, in Anglo-American. I'd probably go and look at this trend off the October lows in Anglo. How are we doing for time? Okay, we're all right. Wow, that's a cracking little trend, if that's the one you meant. So for me, if I was looking to be a buyer, the closest I want my stop would be the other side of 30. But a nice little trend there. Be an interesting one to watch next week. A good breakout through here as well, through 23. So yeah, good little charts going on there for Anglo-American. So yeah, it seems overextended on the weekly, but strong trend. I think. This is why in these live streams I very rarely talk about the RSI, even though I have it on the chart. I think I stopped looking at things like RSIs a long time ago, because the problem is you can miss out on good trends. It did a pretty good job at calling the turns here, but I'm more interested in the chart. So for me, yeah, if I had to do anything, I'd be a buyer on that one. Russell, we did look at the Russell. Interesting market, the Russell. Dollar Chinese CNH. Let's have a look. USD CNH. Oh, there it is. So I don't know. It's interesting, isn't it? I suppose, because this is a bit like the dollar index. This is the dollar going to strengthen argument? So the dollar would buy 7.2 back in May, only buys 6.4 in February. I suppose if you were really bullish on the dollar against the Chinese currency, it's a great entry point down here. Because for me, I'd have my stop the other side is 640. So it's an interesting one down here. But I think I'd be out if it broke 640 and expecting further dollar weakness. But an interesting market to watch. I would be tempted to be a buyer. I've never traded this market. I'm probably never going to trade it. But for me, I'd be tempted to be a buyer because the risk reward is very attractive. But if it broke much below 640, I'd be out. Let's come back to it next week and see. Apple. Let's have a look at Apple. I think the same as last week. It's fallen out of the trend. But for me, just because it's fallen out of the trend doesn't mean the trend has ended. For me, I'd be a buyer. The closest I want my stop, so they're 125. I think we've got a trade on Apple, haven't we? Hang on a second. There we go. So we bought them ages ago, 5th of March, at 119. With that Aussie Dollar trade we did is doing all right. So we're up a bit on the Aussie Dollar trade. I put my stop loss under here, 115 the closest. Maybe give it even a bit more room. But for me, I'd be looking for a run up to 140-ish on Apple. We looked at the Russell. Why is everyone asking about the Russell today? It's really interesting. Never came up before. And loads of people asking about it today. But I think it's an interesting market. And we have looked at it already, so you can watch the recording of this and do it. Have a look at it. Microvision. Only got 4 days, a couple of weeks of data. So it's not really worth looking at that. We did Bitcoin to quite some strength. So just scroll through. Oh, the airline, IAG, yeah, the owner of British Airways, amongst others. IAG. It's interesting, isn't it? Clearly, all got absolutely clobbered because of the virus. But we're still in this recovery trend for IAG. So from off the November lows, still going strong. So for me, I could be tempted to be a buyer with a stop loss, perhaps the closest I have at the other side of 170. Let me just flip up the contact details again, which I've completely lost. Oh, there we go. So I'll start wrapping things up shortly. I'll jump in and do a couple more. But don't forget, Capital.com. It's the trading platform today. Trade all these different markets. Go there to find out more. Find out more about me. DavidJonesTrading.com is my Facebook page. I'm going to do this training course that's going to get launched next week, hopefully. So go there, and I put up trading thoughts during the week. Any questions about markets? Not markets or trading. We can't give financial advice, but any questions about trading, you can email me on my Capital email address, david.jones@capital.com. You can follow me on Twitter @JonesTheMarkets and follow Capital.com on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. And if you're watching this, if you could click on the like button, hopefully that helps things, helps us get more subscribers. That's that. Let's have a look at Palantir. They're a popular one. They come up every week, Palantir. I think they were really weak, and they are still weak. Still weak, I think. We've hit a new low for this move down this week. So for me, I'd still be thinking they're going to drift a bit lower from here. So I wouldn't be in any hurry to be a buyer at the moment on Palantir. AIG, we looked at that. We looked at the Japan 225 right at the beginning. Plug Power, we looked at Plug Power. Tesla, we looked at Tesla. That's it, I think. We'll stop there. It's been an hour, so I'm gonna wrap things up there. So we'll do it all again next week. Lots of markets. Stock markets are really interesting. Let's have a quick look at what they're doing. What are these markets doing? S&P 500. It's calmed down a little bit, but I think it is interesting because the move this week brought us back to this longer-term trend line. So that's really interesting. Gold is interesting next week because we've got these two trends meeting. So we're going to get a breakout one way or the other next week for gold. So I think that's a really interesting market to watch. And I think that's probably it, isn't it? So as I say, go to Capital.com to find out more. Any questions, drop me an email. DavidJonesTrading.com for stuff during the week on Facebook. Follow us on YouTube so we can get some more subscribers. We put out lots of content 3 times a week on YouTube. And we'll do it all again this time, well not this time, but 2:30 next Friday. Thanks for coming along. Always enjoy doing these. Always find some interesting markets that I never look at. If I didn't get to your question, sorry about that. But we'll try and do it again next week. Right, that's it. Have a good weekend.